So we're talking today about augmented reality and virtual reality, AR and VR. Now, obviously these are terms that many of us will have heard in a number of different contexts, but if we could just start from the beginning, what do we mean by AR and VR?
Yeah, sure. So virtual reality is where you are basically immersed in digital content, and it surrounds you with digital content which makes you feel as if you're somewhere else, normally with a headset on. Augmented reality is different. You don't leave the real world behind, but you perceive the real world with digital content layered into it. So you have both going on at the same time. So they're quite similar, but the key difference is that one of them you're leaving behind the real world. You might be going into a version of the real world, or you might be going into a totally fantastical imaginary world, whereas augmented reality, you never leave the real world behind. You just add to the real world with digital content.
And then how do they do that? Is the technology basically the same, or are we talking about fundamentally different types of tech?
Some of it's the same, some of it's quite different. So with virtual reality, the key thing is to put a 3D image in front of to make your mind think you're in a 3D context. So the way that that's done is by putting two slightly different images, one in front of each eye, which your brain then constructs into a 3D scenario. So because the images it's receiving are slightly different, it infers from that depth and 3D content, etc. The image it receives will also be 360 degrees, and they'll also be synchronized with your movement. And that's important because if the synchronization is done well, it gives you the impression that wherever you're moving, actually the digital content is static and it's you moving within it, that's the sort of clever trick of VR. It makes you think that you're moving within the digital environment. And that's done using a combination of gyroscopes to measure the movement of your head, sensors to tell where you are within your physical space, all of that sort of thing. Also the screens in front of your eyes have to refresh and reload, etc. very, very quickly, so that your brain can't perceive any lag between the movements that you make and the response of the content in front of you. So it's very, very clever. So that's how VR works, broadly speaking. AR at the simplest end is very often you use your smartphone to access it, so it's sort of 2D content. AR at the more sophisticated part of it is 3D content, so again you'll need two screens. If it's going to be 3D, you need two screens, one for each eye to give you this perception of depth. AR is done in a slightly different way because you need a camera. You need a camera to relay what's physically in front of you. And then the digital content, there's three different ways, broadly speaking, there's three different ways that it's generated. One is sort of image recognition generated. So the camera spots an image which then triggers some digital content to pop up. And maybe the digital content is the end in itself, or maybe it's a link and it takes you through to a video or some website content. It's something that we've done here.
Yeah, something that we did in a recent client event, and that seemed to work well, bringing digital content into the physical material.
It makes a really nice interface. So that is image recognition AR, if you like. Another way that AR can be triggered is by location. So you're in a particular location and the app recognises or the game recognises where you are, and up pops various different content depending on your physical location. And the third way is called SLAM, which is simultaneous localization and mapping technology. Now that does two different things at the same time simultaneously. It uses GPS or perhaps other sensors around to know where you are in your physical environment, and then it also at the same time spontaneously maps the unknown physical environment immediately around you. So if we were in this room, it would map where you and I are, the chairs, the tables, the bits and pieces all around us, and it does that. And it combines those two bits of information, those two maps of location and context, in order to generate digital content which is integrated into that environment. So it can be much more sophisticated in terms of it can be 3D, it can be interactive, so it will be layered onto the table but not over the edges or layered against the wall, etc.
So then between AR and VR, there's quite a range in what they can actually do.
Yeah, that's right, there is. So at one end of the spectrum you've got probably quite simple 2D augmented reality. It's probably just your smartphone is the kit that you need to generate it. Things like the filters that you get on photos sometimes, where you can get cute eyes or bunny ears or a Santa hat for the time of year that we're recording this. You can get quite simple AR all the way down the other end of the spectrum to the sort of full immersive virtual reality, where you forget the world that you're actually in and believe yourself to be in the digital world that's being created around you. And in the middle there's a very important zone, which is where a lot of people think the future might be, which is where you've got the sophistication of the sort of 3D imagery that you start to believe is physically there in front of you. you take that from the virtual end of the spectrum, and you take the augmented, you keep a degree of reality, and so you combine complex 3D content with your physical environment around you using that sort of SLAM combination of knowing where you are and how you're moving. And so you end up with digital content which is sophisticated and interfaces really convincingly with what's physically around you.
So just bringing it back to the present for the time being, what are the applications that we're seeing for AR and VR right now?
Yeah, so we've mentioned a few already. A lot of entertainment applications, so gaming we've talked about, videos, live streaming. You didn't get a ticket for that event, but you put on your headset and it's live streamed into your headset and it feels like you're there. That's an area that's well established already, really. Also, anything which is sort of design, 3D design, there are a lot of applications around there. There are virtual reality paintbrushes and tools that you can build an environment around you. Sometimes it's for designing things which will then be physically made. Sometimes it's art for art's sake, you know, creative 3D creations that are immersive and you can experience all around you. There are big applications in advertising, sales and marketing, lots of applications there. Very often the videos which are the best way to show people what this sort of thing is, how it works, they're often advertising particular products or sponsored by particular products, etc. It can be used very effectively in sales and marketing. I want to buy a car, what would it look like with that paint job? What would it look like with those alloys? I'm thinking about that sofa, what would it look like in my sitting room? I'm thinking of painting my wall, what would that colour look like? And you can sort of layer the digital colours onto the actual picture of your room, etc. So advertising, sales and marketing are very important. Training, virtual reality in particular, is important in a training context, particularly where you've got large, expensive, perhaps dangerous, high-risk kit that needs to be trained on. It can be a much safer, lower-risk environment to do that in a virtual reality context. I mean, if you think about it, we've actually had that for quite some time when you think about flight simulators. That's a sort of earlier version of virtual reality where you climb into the box rather than put the headset on and the box is constructed around you, but it's the same kind of idea. So there are lots of applications around industry in that way. And then I suppose the other one to mention is the healthcare sector, where virtual reality has proved to be a very, very important tool in relation to therapy and helping people with phobias, helping people with PTSD. You can experience the environment which you find distressing in a way which is less challenging because you can just switch it off, and you can learn to control the triggers that create the distress, and you can learn to cope better using VR therapy. And it's also proved to be very effective pain relief. There are studies, for example, with people with very extensive burns, and when the wound dressings are changed, that can be excruciatingly painful. And they've discovered that if you put them into an immersive VR environment, a very different environment from the burns that they experience, an icy, snowy world, for example, that can actually flood the neural pathways with a different kind of thought and a different kind of response, which blocks out the pain signals and makes it much less painful. And it's been shown to be more effective than morphine, which is incredible.
But I think for some of us, our perceptions will be coloured by things like smart glasses that there have been various products launched over the past few years to great fanfare that we haven't perhaps seen pan out and have quite the same impact.
So if, for example, you're an engineer and you are working on something which is bespoke and unique and needs specific blueprints, specific designs, etc. If you have to keep putting down your tools to go back to the laptop and check the designs, that's quite awkward and quite difficult. If you've got the images in your field of vision and all you have to do to turn the page is tap your glasses or speak a visual command, etc., you can see that that makes life easier. And it's when life is made easier by technology that it really works and it starts to get sticky. Also in that environment, how the glasses look doesn't matter so much. You know, you're not so worried. So in the consumer environment, maybe they didn't look so great or you didn't like the way they looked or whatever. Whereas in a business environment, if it's making it easier to do your job, you're probably wearing a hard hat and safety specs anyway. So, you know, that's less of an issue. So if you sort of take that idea of the business environment, of it making it easier to access digital files, it eases the interface. Part of the reason that people think this might be the future is that where you have these more powerful headsets, there's more powerful headsets which can convey 3D vision. All of a sudden you get all sorts of potential being opened up. There's a very powerful sort of advertising video for one of the mixed reality headsets where, for example, in the kitchen you don't need a screen anymore because it pops up as a hologram, in that sort of way. Or you're digital pet that perhaps used to be in a little bit of kit or a little app, it actually trots along beside you and you can see it as you're, I mean, that's not a business environment application, but again, if you're a designer and you're working collaboratively with people, you're connected and you can both see the mixed reality image and representation of what it is you're designing. You can do it interactively. Maybe you can do it across a distance. You're helping somebody with a task, a physical task. You're watching what they're doing. They can see your instructions being transmitted in front of them with instructions integrated into what it is that you're doing, directions, points, arrows, that sort of thing. So that is why I think people think that this could be the future, because it will ease the interface. It's all about interface. It's all about making digital content easily usable within everyday tasks and just making life simple.
So when we talk about AR and VR being the future, I think it sounds like mixed reality has a very big part in that future.
Yeah, that's what people think. That's what people think. I think the challenge is, one of the challenges is the size of the headset. So at the moment they're still pretty large and they're still very expensive. Now, one of the things that we know is changing is the speed of our data connections. We've got next generation connectivity coming. OC have done our big report with the Economist Intelligence Unit about it. 5G connectivity, for example, will give us very fast data speeds, very low latency. And it may be that will actually remove the need to have large, bulky headsets, because actually you can have the sort of hard, difficult computing being done remotely, and that can then be relayed wirelessly because the connection will be powerful and strong enough, etc. So it may be that's what's needed to stop us from needing to have big, heavy headsets, and to have small, maybe no bigger than the glasses that you and I wear every day anyway, maybe no bigger than this, and with special lenses that can give us the images across the lenses in a normal way. It may be that's what we're waiting for, but we'll have to see. And
you mentioned that Osborne Clarke, we're looking at next generation connectivity. We're lawyers, we're interested in legal issues. What other legal issues can you see around AR and VR?
So I don't think this technology is, some technologies throw up difficult legal problems and they don't really fit with the state of the law. I don't think we're in that sort of territory here. So obviously we have, a lot of this technology is new, it's inventions, etc. So we've got the usual portfolio of patents for some of the inventions, we've got copyright around some of the software that's being written, etc. We've got those sort of issues, but that's nothing new. That's kind of business as usual if you're in the research and development field, all of those issues. We've got the usual sort of, as regards the hardware, we've got the usual sort of product council issues around getting the product fit with, compliant with regulations, compliant with requirements, thinking about product liability, thinking about consumer rights, all of that sort of thing. Again, I don't think there's any unique issues that are thrown up here or unique difficulties. The headsets will be collecting data if that's being processed. Some of it will be personal data about your location, about your movements, about your eye movements. Some of it might be healthcare related. It might be being pooled, it might be being used for profiling, etc. You've got all of that. We're in GDPR territory with that sort of data being collected and processed, if it is. As regards the content, the digital content falls across various different buckets depending on what it is, where you are, etc. There's no sort of single regime for digital content. It depends on is it what's defined as broadcasting, is it video on demand, is it live streaming, all sorts of different things. So it's important to be aware of which territory you're in to make sure you're being compliant with all of that. And I suppose the last thing from a litigation front, there are issues around where the platform you're within a platform that's been created through a VR or an AR environment, and there have been, for example, challenges where people have been trespassing because they were trying to find a new creature, a new character in their AR game. Issues where you are interacting in your VR environment as avatars and something happens in there which affects you in your real life, and was the platform responsible, etc. There's litigation around those kind of issues. So there's a lot of law, and a lot of there's a lot of legal issues are thrown up, but I don't think we're in the territory where they're more complicated than in other environments.
So really, we can see this AR and VR and mixed reality set to grow and grow then?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the ways the future could go, and it's certainly one to watch.
Catherine, thank you very much.
Thank you.